Hello and welcome to another episode of Virtual Legality. I'm your host, Richard Hoeg, managing member of the Hoeg Law business law firm of Northville, Michigan. And today we're going to talk about a little bit of a lighter topic. If you haven't been following this story, it's an odd one. Far Cry 6, or more specifically Ubisoft, has been sending people fairly taunting emails about their progress or lack thereof in the open world shooter game. And for some reason, this story has taken the gaming journalism sphere by storm. Here's Eurogamer. Far Cry 6's goading marketing email raises eyebrows among fans. Ubisoft is emailing Far Cry 6 owners with a roundup of their playtime so far, prompting a mixed response from some fans. The email, written in the style of the game's villain El Presidente, is essentially a message meant to goad player character Danny Rojas back into action. Hola, Rojas. I wanted to thank you for giving me free reign in Yara, the email teases, Yara being the Cuba stand-in for Far Cry 6. Take it easy and know that Yara is in capable hands. The email goes on to question, surely you can do better than this, before listing a set of custom player stats, such as time played and total kills. As more people posted their own emails after Brendan Sinclair of Games Industry Business, we'll talk about his email in a second, it became clear that playtime was not the sole cause. Players with dozens and dozens of hours under their belt were still getting messages. Some found it amusing, others less so. But the blanket mail out here, seemingly regardless of playtime, makes this seem less targeted than it initially appeared, even if it is tied to players not having logged in for a week or so. The emails sent to Far Cry 6 players are intended to be a fun and clever way to remind folks to come back to Yara, and are written as if from El Presidente himself, a Ubisoft spokesperson told Eurogamer this afternoon. We've heard from the community, and we've shared their concern with El Presidente, and know the chorizo, which is the little dog animal in the game, does miss you dearly. And you gotta love the PR person getting questioned about whether their marketing goes too far in trying to get people back into the game, finishing off their communication with an outlet by trying to get people back into the game. I gotta respect the hustle there. And to be frank, as we talk about this story, we're definitely gonna be talking about the legal angle here. That's what Virtual Legality is all about. But we're also gonna be talking about the business angle. I wanna mention, this is not the kind of thing that really bothers me. Certainly, after we take a look at the buttons that have to have been pressed in order to get these emails, it bothers me even less. But just as a general rule, game companies putting something in your inbox, especially if they're just using a kind of interesting tone from the villain of their piece, is not something that's going to let me get to a place where I'm terribly upset about it. Here's Kotaku. Ubisoft is pestering Far Cry 6 players for not playing enough. And they say one of the bleakest things about modern video gaming is the way major publishers are obsessed with not just gaining your attention, but keeping it, holding it trapped and exposed to their monetary ecosystems for as long as humanly possible while they do everything they can to bleed you dry. Kotaku, never one for understatement. They say earlier today, the publisher began sending out emails to players, goading them with some in-universe taunting, like surely you can do better than this. And my favorite headline from this set of articles is PC Gamer's. Far Cry 6's Anton Castillo is so disappointed I haven't killed him yet that he's emailing me about it. I gotta respect a good headline, just like I gotta respect that PR person. And I think it is a good headline. And as Kotaku hinted at, one of the questions here is why are they doing this, right? Far Cry 6, generally speaking, a single-player type game. Ubisoft has sent out emails like this for a lot of time, but not always with respect to games that have what Far Cry 6 have. If you've been in the Ubisoft, the Ubi game environment, whether it's Watch Dogs or Assassin's Creed or Far Cry, you know that Ubisoft sells skins, cosmetics primarily, but also some other things that maybe are a little bit closer to pay to win outside of a competitive context by asking you to pay a little bit more money and get whatever it is that you want out of their microtransaction store. Now, you won't want much of anything if you aren't regularly engaging with their products. So much like a mobile game or Destiny or whatever other live services game catches your fancy, Ubisoft has a vested interest in using the information they've gathered about you to try to make sure that you're staying engaged with the game. And then whatever 1% or more of people that are engaged with the game purchase these V-Buck kind of packs from them, are going to make Ubisoft money. Now, Brendan Sinclair, as I mentioned, at Games Industry Biz, which I really think started this, it appears to be the nexus point from which all these articles sprang, took offense to this whole kind of project. He says a lot of games are already ruthlessly designed to maximize engagement, but now they email and hassle you if you dare to stop playing them. And one of the really interesting things about this story is, as I mentioned, Far Cry has been putting out these kinds of messages forever. I got an email, it wasn't that hard to find when I checked my inbox. When I started playing Far Cry 6, it said, welcome to Far Cry, here's what you can do here. I looked at other games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Ubisoft has sent messages that say, here's what you have done in this environment, come on back. The difference appears to be the mocking tone, which to my mind is superior to just getting PR speak about the game they want you to engage with. And I think Ubisoft is probably entertaining that notion themselves. That's why you see the PR person with Eurogamer being a little bit playful about it. But I also don't agree with this tweet that Brendan Sinclair follows up with that says, normalize letting people stop playing a game if they're not enjoying it. And particularly, I don't mind anybody saying this goes too far for them, but I want to make sure the characterization is correct. You getting a message from Ubisoft, even with this language, isn't forcing you to play Far Cry 6. In fact, it's just an email. So when we talk about letting people stop playing a game, you aren't in any way prevented from stopping playing Far Cry 6. I know for a fact I'll probably be playing Far Cry 6 for a year or more if Ubisoft games are any indication on the whole. I just take that long playing them. I play them between other more narrative linear games that I'm otherwise enjoying. And yet, it was that tone, it was these emails or these tweets that led to really a lot of headlines, a lot of articles, culminating a little bit in IGN putting up an article just a few hours ago entitled Far Cry 6's Message from El Presidente are spurring debate among fans and critics. So this story isn't just the story of people that are upset about this. They aren't just Brendan Sinclair who wants to talk about normalizing letting people stop playing a game. There are folks that, like me, found this to be fairly entertaining. If you go through this whole article, you'll see folks calling it genuinely funny and good trolling. You'll also see a reference that I think is important to this conversation, and that's that Far Cry 6 is ostensibly a single-player game, with IGN going so far as to say, emails of this sort are relatively common among live services games, but Far Cry 6's reminders have grabbed attention in part because of their playful, aggressive tone, as we just talked about, and in part because Far Cry 6 is ostensibly a single-player game. Now, as we talked about, it doesn't matter what kind of game you're selling if you've got that microtransaction store. If engagement is going to lead to a bottom-line increase, it makes sense as a publisher or as a game company to send out these emails if the people let you do it. So it doesn't really matter, except that I think it highlights the question that we've been having in the video game industry for a long time now, which is how far is too far? When do single-player games kind of cross this line into mobile gotcha advertising tactics? And for some, I think this rubbed them the wrong way. Now, why am I a little bit more lenient on Ubisoft here? Well, it's because Ubisoft has been deliberately collecting your emails for this purpose for quite a while. Here we are on the Ubisoft Connect webpage, in which Ubisoft describes the Ubisoft Connect plan. They describe it as follows. Ubisoft Connect is the ecosystem of players' services for Ubisoft games across all platforms. It aims at giving the best environment for all players to enjoy their games and connect with each other, whatever the device. Ubisoft Connect is a free service available on all devices. You can access it on your PC through a mobile app or on console directly from your games. All you need to log in is a Ubisoft account. And I'd be willing to bet you that you know exactly what kind of information you have to put into that Ubisoft account request form in order to create such an account. Now, if you scroll all the way to the bottom of this, you see, hey, we're going to give you prizes, we're going to potentially give you discounts, we're going to connect you with folks, and you see, as we look at here in Virtual Legality, the terms of use link right at the bottom. Now, the terms of use link for Ubisoft Connect just takes you to the standard Ubisoft terms of use, which we've looked at in previous videos here in Virtual Legality, especially when folks were up in arms about whether or not Ubisoft could steal your likeness and things like that. If you're interested in that question, please do check out Ubisoft topics on this channel. We talk about these terms and conditions extensively. But for purposes of this conversation, we need to note two things. One, that Ubisoft's privacy policy is an integral part of these terms and is integrated into them by reference, which is legalese for whatever's in that privacy policy document is part of the contract you're entering into with Ubisoft. Further, when we talk about account creation, it says you can create an account at our web address by supplying a valid email address, truthful and accurate information, and all the necessary criteria. I like in a legal contract that this just references out to whatever we ask for on the form, because that's going to be what necessary criteria is. We're not going to tell you more. Hopefully, it isn't too invasive. But they do single out what's important to this conversation, which is that they're going to get an email address from you for using Ubisoft Connect. And that's to be expected. That's really why they are doing this. They want to create that mailing list that they can contact you about their new game that's coming out, about why you might like this Rainbow Six Siege offshoot because you like Rainbow Six Siege, whatever it might be. But here in the US, in various jurisdictions around the world, you have to comply with the rules that you set for how you're going to use folks' data. Now, some people think that that's a great deal of protection. I will be honest with you, it's not necessarily. For the most part, even under the GDPR, certainly under most US data protections, you're going to be allowed to do most things as long as you tell people that you are doing them, that you tell people what information you're collecting from them and how you intend to use it. Now, Ubisoft walks the line a little bit here, but not so much that I think they get in trouble. And we'll see why as we look at this document. So we're in the privacy policy. It's incorporated into the terms of use, which is a part of accessing your Ubisoft account, getting Ubisoft Connect, all of which are usually going to be done in connection with playing an Assassin's Creed or a Watch Dogs or a Far Cry, as we are talking about in this video. And what does Ubisoft say? Why do we collect your personal data? We collect your personal data so that you can benefit from our services. And we make it our duty to adhere to the rules of the game. Point in fact, the government generally makes it your duty to adhere to the rules that you set forth in your privacy policy. That's kind of written in to most of the statutes, but good on you, Ubisoft. It's welcome to hear that you're going to adhere to the rules of the game as you set them. But continuing, what is personal data? What are we concerned with here? Well, it's a lot of things. It's your name, obviously. It's your social security number, whatever else it might be. It is your email address, which we know they're collecting as part of setting up an account. So when do we collect your personal data? This is the first part of any good privacy policy. We collect it when you put it into a form and you send it to us. When you create a Ubisoft account, we collect your username, password, email address, date of birth, and country. Some items of data, such as your username, are made public to allow your community to find you in our services. When you create your account, you can manage your subscription to receive the Ubisoft newsletter by email. You can unsubscribe at any time by clicking on the unsubscribe link at the end of each newsletter or in your account management page in the privacy and communication section. Now, we're not talking about a newsletter here, but this is pretty informative for what happened with most folks. So if you enter in to an account with Ubisoft and you're connecting your games through Ubisoft Connect, you want to get that super cool axe in Assassin's Creed Valhalla or whatever else they're giving away in Far Cry 6 for playing their games, you file for one of these things, and as you can tell from the language here, it would certainly appear from the outside looking in that you are volunteered to be subscribed to their newsletter, as well as some other things we'll talk about. And you can unsubscribe by going into the account management page, but a lot of folks are going to be signing up for this particular service directly from their consoles. That if you go and you play Far Cry 6, there'll be a button that says, hey, sign up for this. You sign up for it, and you maybe don't ever think about it again, except for when El Presidente sends you emails that are covered in Kotaku and IGN and Eurogamer and everywhere else. But there is a way to unsubscribe, which Ubisoft is going to allow us to do, and we're going to take a look at as part of this video. So when do we collect data? When you create your account, when you sign into our services, when you play our games, when you use our games, when you play a game on your console, when you interact with other players, when you are exposed to personalized advertisements and content, you take part in a contest, you contact us, or when you don't follow our rules. That one's particularly interesting because it implies there isn't a consent component at all there. If you're in there breaking their rules somehow, they will find you, which is amusing, probably okay from a perspective of a publisher and a game controller, but it is interesting to see in their privacy policy. How long do we keep your data? Well, Ubisoft says we will only keep your data for the time strictly necessary to carry out the operations for which said data has been collected by Ubisoft. You gotta like how lawyers make their sentences, right? And if that were the only thing said here, I would say, well, how do you keep our email address at all? Because that's not going to be strictly necessary to carry out basically anything that you want to do, whether it's Ubisoft Connect or any other operation of your video games. But they make clear that when we're talking about accounts, that means forever. For example, they say, we will keep the data associated with your account until the closure of the account. We need that email address. We're going to use it for fun stuff. You trust us. So we're going to keep it for as long as you have an account with Ubisoft. How do they share it? We don't really need to know how they share it because we're talking about a Ubisoft communication here. What are your rights and how to exercise them gets us back to the point we were talking about before. You can give or withdraw your consent through their account services. At any time, you may withdraw your consent or object to the receipt of newsletters or advertising emails, which is exactly what the subject of this video is. The personalization of advertisements, which is corollary to what this video is about because you do see those stats in those emails, or the sharing of your data with our partners. How? On the account management page in the privacy and communication section, which we'll be finishing off this video with. When can Ubisoft use your data? Well, we can use it when there's the existence of a contract between you and Ubisoft. You enter into this contract by accepting the terms of use. But if you go and you look at that terms of use document, there isn't any obvious place where we start talking about sending you emails from El Presidente. In fact, it's actually worthwhile to note that the very first bullet that is a violation of their rules of conduct is abusing, harassing, or bullying users or Ubisoft representatives via verbal or written communications, including but not limited to trolling, flaming, spamming, or using language or content we deem illegal. Now, Ubisoft's going to be in full control of this. I'm not suggesting that they violated their own rules, but it is amusing that if a user had sent the very same kind of conceptual email with the same kind of language, oh, you suck, shouldn't you be better at Far Cry 6, then it could possibly be a violation of their rules of conduct. Again, I'm more amused at that than anything. It's not a legal issue. But there isn't anything else really in these terms of use that gets you to the Far Cry 6 emails question. Where it does, however, is in this bullet point 2 and this bullet point 3. When can Ubisoft use your data? Well, in bullet point 2, they say Ubisoft's legitimate interest or reasonable expectations of users to offer you the best possible user experience, such as to ensure the security of the services, moderate the community, respond to your requests and questions, or to send you newsletters. Which of those doesn't belong? Security, moderation, responding to questions, and sending you newsletters. Fair enough, Ubisoft. It's in your legitimate interest to market your goods, your services, your wares. We understand that. But the third bullet is really where Ubisoft is going to be ultimately fine with these emails, and that's when you consent to our offer of advertisements, products, services, or personalized content depending on your user profile. And here's where the rubber hits the road. It certainly appears to me that when you file for a Ubisoft account, you are automatically subscribed into a whole host of things, especially if you don't see the PC screen through the console. And I know this primarily because I don't subscribe to anything. I'm a hermit on this kind of stuff. I'm really not interested in your marketing emails. And yet, as part of this video, I was able to show you the Far Cry 6 email that I received from Ubisoft on this very question. Why? Because when I went to look at the account information, privacy, and communications tab in my Ubisoft account, I saw these 3 categories. The first of which was Ubisoft emails. Now, you see this listed as unsubscribed right now, but when I was researching this video and preparing to give it to you, I saw that this actually said subscribed, activated, and activated, which frankly didn't sound like me. So it appears to be an opt-out procedure that Ubisoft is using. Now, you Europeans can have your own comments on that. Maybe you started differently. Europe has a whole host of rules about opt-in versus opt-out. If you are European and you can look at your account information, find something different, let me know. I'd certainly be interested in that part of the conversation. But if you look at this, you'll see that Ubisoft says, do you want to receive personalized news, event information, community content, and special offers about Ubisoft games and services by email? Note, you'll still receive email communications for account management purposes, etc., the technical stuff, but you won't get our marketing, and this had been checked as yes. Now, if you check as no, it would surprise me greatly if you continued to receive emails from Presidente. So when we talk about this issue, we are talking about tone. Some folks didn't like the kind of playful nature that Ubisoft used, but overall, it was within basically everybody's power to say, Ubisoft, I don't want your emails. So the question might become not just about tone, it might be about that opt-out, opt-in, depending on whether or not that's the way the account management worked when I entered into it, works now. A whole host of questions there. But either way, at bare minimum, I want this video to serve as a PSA that if you sign in to your account management, you go to privacy communication, you uncheck all these boxes, including these two on advertising through Ubisoft Connect, receive personalized communications about Ubisoft news, etc., and advertising on partner websites, then Ubisoft has assured you won't get any of those kinds of emails or problematic communications. Does that mean that Ubisoft has to abide by that? Could they breach that promise to you? Of course, any company or individual could. But if they did with this privacy policy on the book saying, hey, we need your consent, which they do, if they were to send you those emails or that newsletter or anything else that's described on their own website, they would get into a lot more trouble than they otherwise would. There are legal interests here that would suggest if this button is pressed to unsubscribe, they would get into a fair amount of trouble if they just started sending you emails regardless of that selection. So, end of the day, from a legal perspective, I don't have a lot of complaints about this process, although if it is opt-out, it maybe isn't the best way to handle these kinds of things. And I understand folks that don't necessarily like this kind of communication. I will say I do, again, side with Ubisoft. I like the PC Gamer headline. I think this is amusing. I think it's got a kind of alternative reality game component to it, and there's a lot worse in the marketing sphere that I have seen just in covering things for Virtual Legality. So if this is the worst of it for Far Cry 6, I gotta tell you, I don't think it quite deserves the amount of attention it got, but I'm glad I'm here to talk to you all about it. This has been Virtual Legality for today. If you enjoyed talking about the business and law of video games, Far Cry 6 emails, Ubisoft, and more, please consider supporting the channel. If you get value out of these conversations, we've got a Patreon. We've got other ways to support the channel listed in the description to this video, or otherwise, just subscribing, giving up votes, down votes, sharing this on Reddit, or any other forums you might find yourself on. All very, very helpful. If you caught this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. And if you listen to it as a podcast, thank you so much for listening. And I will catch you on the very next episode of Virtual Legality. Virtual Legality is a YouTube video series with audio podcast versions presented as commentary and for education and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you have legal questions about the topics discussed, please consult your own legal counsel.